You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. Have you ever felt like life's distractions, setbacks, or emotional chaos keep pulling you away from your true potential? Imagine having the tools to turn those obstacles into stepping stones, to master your emotions, and to lead a life of purpose. This video isn't just about theory, it's a guide to practical wisdom. Today, we'll follow the journey of one man as he confronts modern challenges, like digital distractions, emotional reactivity, and uncertain times, and discovers how Stoic philosophy transforms his life. Along the way, you'll learn actionable steps to stay focused in a distracted world, build resilience, and embrace life's struggles as opportunities for growth. If you're ready to regain control and find clarity, stick with me until the end. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Stoic Narratives Official for more content that helps you unlock your potential. Let's dive in. Number 1. Overcoming digital overload. Reclaim your focus in a distracted world. Picture this. John, a successful professional, starts his day with a glance at his phone. 5 minutes turn into 30 as he scrolls through emails, news updates, and social media feeds. By the time he sits at his desk, he's already feeling overwhelmed. His mind is scattered, and his focus? Completely gone. Sound familiar? In today's world, technology promises connection and productivity, but for many, it brings distraction and stress. Social media, notifications, and endless news cycles pull us away from being present and intentional. It's no wonder so many of us feel like we're running on a treadmill, getting nowhere. For John, this digital overload was draining, not just his time, but also his mental clarity and emotional balance. Now here's the unexpected twist. Instead of downloading another productivity app or setting stricter schedules, John turned to Stoic philosophy, an ancient practice surprisingly relevant in a hyper-connected world. He began with a principle from Marcus Aurelius: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This realization hit John hard. He couldn't control how many emails landed in his inbox or how often his phone buzzed, but he could control his reaction to these distractions. He started practicing what we call digital mindfulness, a Stoic-inspired approach to reclaiming focus and mental clarity. John began small. Each night he set his phone to Do Not Disturb from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. Those 12 hours became sacred. Without notifications pinging constantly, John found space to reflect, read, and connect with his thoughts. It wasn't easy at first. He felt the urge to check his phone every few minutes. But as the days passed, he noticed something. His mind felt sharper, his evenings calmer. The next step was even more transformative. John decided to question how social media made him feel. Each time he opened an app, he paused and asked, "Is this making me feel gratitude or envy?" The answer wasn't always pleasant. He realized he often compared himself to others, feeling inadequate instead of inspired. So he made a bold choice. He unfollowed accounts that triggered negative emotions and curated his feed to reflect his values. By observing his emotional responses, John wasn't just reducing digital clutter. He was applying practical wisdom to align his online habits with his mental and emotional well-being. This, in essence, is what Stoicism teaches us: to focus on what is within our control and let go of what isn't. But let's be honest, giving up constant connectivity isn't easy. Technology is deeply embedded in our daily lives. John had his struggles too. There were moments when he slipped back into his old habits, scrolling aimlessly out of boredom or stress. Instead of judging himself, he used these moments as opportunities for growth. He would ask, "Why did I turn to my phone just now? What could I do instead that aligns with the person I want to be?" This reflective practice became a powerful tool. It wasn't about perfection. It was about progress. John found that even a 1% improvement each day compounded into significant change over time. Now imagine this for yourself. What would it feel like to wake up without reaching for your phone first thing? To spend an hour each evening reflecting, reading, or simply being present with your thoughts? How would your life change if you viewed technology as a tool to serve you, not control you? These are the questions John answered by practicing digital mindfulness, and they're questions we all need to ask ourselves. The truth is, the digital world isn't going anywhere. But with Stoic principles as a guide, we can navigate it with purpose, clarity, and resilience. As you reflect on this, consider one small step you could take today. Could you set aside an hour to be tech-free? Could you pause the next time you feel the urge to scroll and ask, is this helping me or holding me back? Remember, focus isn't something we find, it's something we reclaim. And the path to reclaiming it starts with understanding what's within your control. So what's your first step? Number 2. Building resilience in uncertain times, a Stoic approach to modern setbacks. John thought he had everything figured out, a stable job, a solid routine, and a clear path ahead. But life, as it often does, threw him a curveball. The company he'd dedicated years to downsize, and just like that, he found himself without work. The sudden uncertainty hit him like a tidal wave. Have you ever felt that way? Everything you relied on suddenly vanished, leaving you wondering, what now? At first, John did what most of us might do. He panicked. He stayed up late scrolling job boards, sending out resumes, and comparing himself to former colleagues who seemed to be thriving. It was exhausting and honestly demoralizing. But then he remembered a quote he'd read in Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That line lingered in his mind. Could the very thing that seemed to block his path actually be the thing that set him on a better one? It seemed absurd at first, but Stoic philosophy often turns conventional thinking on its head. John decided to test this idea, starting small. He began by writing down every challenge he was facing: financial stress, career uncertainty, and self-doubt. Instead of seeing them as obstacles, he reframed them as opportunities to grow. And here's where things got interesting. One morning, while updating his resume for the 100th time, John caught himself spiraling into frustration. Instead of letting the negativity consume him, he paused and asked, "What can I learn from this?" It was a simple question, but it shifted his perspective. He realized that losing his job gave him the chance to explore something he'd always put off: starting his own business. What once felt like a setback began to look like a turning point. Of course, this didn't mean the journey was easy. Stoicism isn't about pretending everything's fine, it's about facing reality with courage. For John, this meant accepting the uncertainty and choosing to act anyway. He reminded himself that while he couldn't control the economy or how others responded to his ideas, he could control his own decisions and efforts. And let's be real, there were some rough days. Like the time he pitched a business idea to an investor who politely but very firmly told him it wasn't going to work. Did John want to crawl under a rock? Absolutely. But instead, he leaned into another Stoic principle, amor fati, or the love of fate. This idea teaches us to embrace everything that happens, even failure, as part of our journey. John asked himself, what can this rejection teach me? It turns out that it taught him to refine his pitch, which landed him his first client a month later. Now, let me ask you this. How do you handle setbacks? Do you see them as barriers, or do you ask yourself, what's within my power to change? That question became John's mantra, and it helped him focus on what mattered most: his mindset and his next steps. Every morning, he started journaling about the challenges he faced and the lessons they offered. He found that by simply writing them down, his problems felt less overwhelming. They became manageable, even motivating. The truth is that uncertainty is inevitable. Whether it's a job loss, a health scare, or even just the chaos of everyday life, we all face moments where the ground feels shaky. But Stoic philosophy reminds us that we're stronger than we think. Resilience isn't about avoiding challenges, it's about transforming them into opportunities. And sometimes a little humor helps too. John liked to joke, "If I can survive 2020, I can survive anything." So, the next time life throws you a curveball, remember this: what stands in your way can become your way. Write down your obstacles, reflect on what they're teaching you, and take one step forward. After all, resilience isn't built overnight. It's built one choice at a time. And hey, if John can turn a job loss into a new beginning, what's stopping you? Number 3, strengthening personal relationships. Apply Stoicism to emotional conflicts. John had always thought of himself as a calm and composed guy, until his teenage son borrowed his car without asking and returned it with a scratch. Suddenly, calm flew out the window. Words were said, voices were raised, and an awkward silence settled between them. Sound familiar? How often do emotional reactions like this leave us regretting what we said or wishing we'd handled things better? Stoicism, as it turns out, is a lifesaver in moments like these. One of its core principles is learning to observe your emotions rather than letting them control you. Easier said than done, right? But think about it. How many arguments could you avoid if you paused even for just a moment before reacting? Epictetus nailed it when he said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." So John decided to put this wisdom to work. The next time his son annoyed him by leaving dishes in the sink this time, he paused before speaking. Instead of snapping, he asked himself, what part of this is within my control? The dishes? Not really. His son's behavior? Definitely not. But his reaction? 100%. That realization helped him choose his words more carefully. Instead of scolding, he explained how it affected him. And guess what? His son actually apologized. A small win for Stoicism. Of course, this isn't about being a pushover. Stoicism doesn't mean ignoring conflict. It's about managing it with intention and reason. John found journaling to be a game changer here. At the end of each day, he wrote down moments when he felt triggered and reflected on why. Was it frustration? Pride? Fear? Identifying these patterns gave him insight into his own emotional habits. Let me ask you, how often do you react without thinking? How much better could your relationships be if you paused and asked, is this reaction helping or hurting? John began to notice that by choosing his responses carefully, his relationships improved, not just with his son, but with his wife, friends, and colleagues too. Now, don't get me wrong, John wasn't perfect. There were slip-ups. For the time, he tried to stay calm during a family dinner and ended up blurting, "Could someone pass the salt without arguing for once?" But here's the thing. Progress isn't about never making mistakes. It's about learning from them. So the next time someone pushes your buttons, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, what part of this is in my control? You might be surprised how much smoother your relationships become when you stop reacting and start responding with intention. And hey, it beats apologizing for yelling about a scratched car, right? Number 4. Setting intentional goals. Break free from the pressure to do it all. John's life felt like a never-ending to-do list. Between work deadlines, family responsibilities, and staying in shape, he was trying to juggle more balls than a circus performer. He'd wake up every morning with good intentions, but end each day feeling like he hadn't accomplished enough. Have you ever felt that way? No matter how much you do, it's never quite enough. That's where Stoicism stepped in to change everything for John. One of its core teachings is the idea of focusing only on what is within your control and letting go of the rest. This principle transformed how John approached his goals. Instead of trying to do it all, he asked himself, what actually matters to me? What aligns with my values? Here's where things got practical. John decided to apply the SMART method, setting goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. He stopped aiming for vague, lofty ambitions like get healthier or spend more time with family. Instead, he wrote down clear goals. Exercise for 30 minutes, 3 times a week. Or have dinner with my family without phones twice a week. And you know what? Those small, intentional goals added up. John started to see real progress, not because he was doing more, but because he was doing what mattered. It's like Epictetus said, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. But let's be honest. Setting intentional goals sounds great, right? Sticking to them is the hard part. John had his struggles too, like the time he ambitiously planned to wake up at 5 a.m. for a morning run, only to hit snooze 5 times and declare, well, there's always tomorrow. The key, he realized, was not perfection, but consistency. He reviewed his goals weekly, tweaking them to stay realistic and relevant. Let me ask you this. Are your goals really yours, or are they shaped by what others expect of you? John discovered that many of his past goals were driven by outside pressures, trying to impress a boss, meet societal standards, or keep up with peers. When he started setting goals that aligned with his values, the pressure to do it all melted away. So what would happen if you did the same? If you stopped chasing everything and focused on what truly mattered to you? Remember, success isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters, one step at a time. And if John can figure it out, despite a rocky start with that 5 a.m. run, so can you. What's your first intentional goal going to be? Number 5. Cultivating emotional intelligence. Master the space between stimulus and response. John always thought of himself as pretty level-headed, until he found himself stuck in traffic one morning, running late for an important meeting. The guy in front of him decided that driving 5 miles below the speed limit was perfectly acceptable. John's blood boiled. His grip on the steering wheel tightened, and the words forming in his mind were not, shall we say, virtuous. Can you relate? How often do we let small things hijack our emotions? It wasn't the slow driver that ruined John's morning, it was his reaction. And that's when he remembered a Stoic principle that changed everything: the space between stimulus and response. Marcus Aurelius put it best: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. John decided to test this idea. The next time something irritated him, like when his colleague sent yet another passive-aggressive email, he didn't react immediately. Instead, he paused and asked himself, why am I feeling this way? Is this worth my energy? More often than not, the answer was no. By creating this mental space, he was able to choose a response that aligned with his values, rather than lashing out or stewing in frustration. Here's the funny thing. When John stopped reacting impulsively, he noticed how much more in control he felt. It was as if the world around him slowed down and he could finally breathe. But let's be real, this wasn't magic. It took practice. Have you ever tried pausing when your emotions are firing on all cylinders? It's like trying to hold back a sneeze. However, over time, John realized that this simple pause was his greatest tool for emotional intelligence. He also started journaling daily to reflect on his reactions. At the end of each day, John wrote about moments when he felt triggered and what he could have done differently. Sometimes he laughed at himself. Like that time he got irrationally annoyed at his neighbor for mowing the lawn too early. Writing it down helped him see that his emotional reactions weren't always rational, but they were always teachable moments. Let me ask you, how much better would your life be if you mastered that space between what happens to you and how you respond? What arguments could you avoid? What peace could you find? John's journey wasn't perfect, but it was progress. He learned that cultivating emotional intelligence isn't about suppressing feelings, it's about understanding them and choosing how to act. And hey, if John can stay calm in traffic, maybe there's hope for the rest of us. So, what's your next step to mastering your responses? Number 6. Practicing self-care with a Stoic mindset. Balance the body and mind. John was the type of guy who skipped breakfast, powered through lunch with nothing but coffee, and considered collapsing on the couch after work his version of rest. Sound familiar? He thought self-care was indulgent, something reserved for spa weekends or motivational posters. But then he stumbled across a Stoic principle that reframed his entire perspective. Caring for your body is an act of discipline, not indulgence. Marcus Aurelius himself wrote, "You must take care of your body if you are to take care of your mind." For John, this was a light bulb moment. He realized his physical and mental well-being were deeply connected, and neglecting one meant undermining the other. But where to start? Instead of overhauling his entire lifestyle overnight, John decided to focus on small, sustainable habits. He began each morning with a 10-minute walk, not to burn calories, but to clear his mind and connect with the present moment. It wasn't always easy, especially on days when his bed felt like the coziest place on earth. But as the weeks passed, those walks became something he looked forward to. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you truly listened to what your body needed? Not what the world says you should do, like buying the latest fitness gadget, but what actually makes you feel good and balanced. John also tackled his diet, inspired by Musonius Rufus, who advised simplicity in eating. No more skipping meals or grabbing fast food on the go. Instead, John started preparing simple, nourishing meals that gave him energy without weighing him down. And no, he didn't suddenly become a master chef. His go-to was grilled chicken and veggies. But he noticed the difference. Clearer thoughts, steadier moods, and fewer mid-afternoon crashes. And then there was sleep. John used to see late nights as a badge of honor, proof of how hardworking he was. But Stoicism taught him that rest is essential for resilience. He committed to a consistent bedtime, even if it meant missing a late-night Netflix binge. The result? He woke up feeling sharper, ready to tackle the day with intention. Now I know what you're thinking. Who has time for all this? But here's the thing. Self-care doesn't have to be time-consuming or extravagant. For John, it was about small, deliberate choices, like pausing to breathe, moving his body, or eating mindfully. So, how are you taking care of yourself? Are you fueling your body with purpose, or are you just getting by? Remember, resilience starts with respecting the vessel that carries you through life. If John can trade fast food and late nights for balance and clarity, what's stopping you from starting small today? Number 7. Finding meaning in adversity. Embrace setbacks as stepping stones. John thought his career was finally taking off. He had landed a big project at work, poured his heart into it, and was ready to present it. But when the day came, his boss shot it down with barely a glance. "Not quite what we're looking for," she said. John was crushed. All that effort was gone in a moment. He couldn't help but ask himself, why even bother if this is how things end up? But then, later that evening, as he stared blankly at his laptop, a line from Marcus Aurelius popped into his head. "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." It didn't make sense at first. How could a failure move him forward? But the more John thought about it, the more he saw that his setback wasn't the end of the road. It was a chance to reevaluate and grow. So, he did something bold. Instead of wallowing in frustration, John reviewed his work and asked himself, what could I do differently? What lesson is this teaching me? He realized he'd focused too much on details his boss didn't care about, and not enough on what mattered most to the project's goals. That realization became a turning point, and his next presentation hit the mark. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you faced a setback? Did you let it define you, or did you ask yourself what it could teach you? Stoicism teaches us that adversity isn't just something to endure. It's something to embrace. And no, that doesn't mean pretending to love failure, who actually enjoys failing. It means seeing failure as a teacher, a way to refine yourself. Of course, John's journey wasn't perfect. There were moments when he still felt discouraged, like the time his neighbor's dog ran off with his morning newspaper. Really? He thought, even the dog is against me today? But here's where Stoic humor came in handy. He learned to laugh at life's small annoyances, reminding himself they were temporary and not worth losing sleep over. Adversity often feels like a roadblock, but what if it's actually a detour guiding you towards something better? John's career challenges helped him build resilience and sharpen his skills. Over time, he began to welcome setbacks, not because they were fun, but because they gave him opportunities to grow stronger. So, how do you view the obstacles in your life? Are they barriers, or are they stepping stones? Remember, every challenge is a chance to practice patience, courage, and adaptability. And who knows, maybe, like John, you'll find that what once seemed like a failure becomes the foundation for your greatest success. What's your next step forward? Life will always throw challenges our way, whether it's distractions, setbacks, or emotional conflicts. But as the Stoics remind us, it's not what happens to us that matters. It's how we respond. By reclaiming our focus, setting meaningful goals, and embracing adversity, we become stronger, more resilient, and more intentional in how we live. So let me ask you, what's one step you'll take today to start applying these principles in your life? Will you pause before reacting, set a goal that aligns with your values, or find meaning in a recent setback? Remember, every small step matters. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to begin. If this video inspired you, give it a like and share it with someone who's also on this journey. And don't forget to subscribe to Stoic Narratives Official for more content that helps you unlock your potential. The path to a more purposeful life starts here. What will you do with it?